Waiting for the class to start. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Punaktu Saha Viryam Karva Vahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvisa Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May He protect us. May He sustain us. May we grow in strength together. May our study together be fruitful. And may we not hate one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. Okay, so we're studying the Katha Upanishad, and as you mentioned before, that if you're going to study the Upanishads, the Katha Upanishad is probably the best one to start with. It's very simple, clear, well organized, and it's got a good story, one of the best stories in the Upanishads, and it also gives you the basic core teachings of the Upanishads. So it's a very good Upanishad for learning about what the Upanishads and what Vedanta has to say. So we'd already read some of the verses. So it says, Vajasravasa, also called Aldalaka, in the line of the ancient sage Vajasravaha, famous for his charity, performed a sacrifice known as Vishwajit, in the hope of getting adequate rewards in heaven. The rule of this sacrifice was that he would give away in charity everything he possessed. Vajasravasa had a young son named Nachiketa. Nachiketa watched the kind of gifts his father was distributing. He was young, but he had faith in the scriptures. He pondered in the light of that faith. There are old cows, too feeble to eat, drink, give any milk, or breed. He who gives such cows as gifts to the others goes to a cheerless world after death. And that world is known as Ananda. So Nachiketa watched his father's sacrifice, and the idea behind the sacrifice, as I said, was that the performer was supposed to give away all of his possessions as part of the sacrifice, and then he would go to heaven, get rewards in heaven. But Nachiketa, his young son, saw that the cows that he was giving away had eaten their last grass, and were kind of at the end. It's like a person who cleans out his garage and then wants a tax deduction as a result. You know? And I mentioned first class how in Swami Varadananda's time, I had a lot of experience with cars that had eaten their last grass and beeped their last beep and were really on their last legs. So this is the kind of gifts that Nachiketas' father was making. And then, so Nachiketas becomes concerned because he's violating the whole principle of the charity and of the worship, and he's thinking he'll get bad results as a result of this. So then Nachiketa asked his father, he said, "To whom will you give me?" He asked twice and even thrice, because his father did not reply. Finally, his father said, "I will give you to death." So his father, Nachiketa, is pestering his father. Well, then now, since I'm also one of your possessions, hoping to make the worship right, he says, since I'm also one of your possessions, to whom will you give me? And he keeps asking his father. His father, irritated, I guess, said, "Oh, I'll give you to death." In other words, go away, stop bothering me. But then Nachiketa thinks to himself, he says, I am surely among the foremost of Father's children and disciples. If I am not among the foremost, I am at least among the second best. I am by no means among the worst. What service will Father render to Yama by sending me to him? Now then, Nachiketas' father, he realized this was just in a moment of irritation, he'd said something, but then he regrets it and wants to back out and say, forget it. But then Nachiketa says, consider how your ancestors, the great souls of the past, lived their lives. Consider also the lives of the great souls living now. Born, grows, and dies. It is the same with human beings. So Nachiketas, when his father wants to renege on his statement, that I send you to Yama, Nachiketa said, no, you have to stand by the truth. And as we mentioned in the previous class, how Nachiketas is known for two particular things. One is Shraddha, faith in the scriptures, faith in Dharma, and also confidence. And the second thing he's known for is truth. Nachiketa abides by truth, and as we mentioned before, that's one of the most fundamental of spiritual disciplines. Because truth, ultimately when you talk about what is God, God is reality, God is truth. When you talk about our individual lives and all of our hopes and dreams and everything else, this isn't truth. And we mentioned before how most people have created a kind of a fictional personality, a fictional self-image that they try to believe about themselves. Oh, I'm such a wonderful person. And they try to project that on other people and have other people, oh yes, you're a wonderful person. But all of that is based upon creations of the mind, kind of our own imagination. But underlying our personality, underlying all of our kind of individual works and desires and so forth, is the reality of our being, the truth of what we are. And so by abiding in truth, a person becomes very solid in his life. When you spend your life trying to protect this image that you created, this self-image that you're trying to believe this is who I am or what I am, you're always on very shaky ground. If anybody says, no, you're not cool at all, you're not the person you think you are, then we get upset. Our whole self-image kind of tends to collapse, like a house of cards. Because it's all kind of a fictional thing that's created. But when you begin to understand what the nature of truth is, and particularly what the nature of your truth is, your reality, then you start to, everything, the mind and all of its insecurities, its fears, all these things, these start to disappear, and you're standing on very solid ground. And a person who really abides by truth, and this doesn't mean telling the truth, it means living by the truth, then that person becomes just very solid inside. And when it's really strong, and like in the case of Nachiketa, they will even face death rather than abandon truth. So Nachiketas tells his father, think of how noble our ancestors were, how noble the great sages were, and how they lived by truth. And you need to do like that. And he said, people come and go all the time, like corn that grows and goes, but truth abides forever. And so this, and Nachiketas' father, like I said, he wanted to back out and say, no, don't go to Yama, but Nachiketa said, no, you said this word, and now you have to abide by the word. And so then Nachiketa goes to the abode of death. So when a Brahmin comes to a house as a guest, he is to be treated as fire. To please him, offer him the prescribed things. So, Vaivashvata, fetch him water. So now when Nachiketa goes to the house of Yama, the god of death, Yama isn't home. He's off on business somewhere. And so for 3 days and 3 nights, Yama sits by his door outside his house without food or water or anything. And when Yama comes back, then his household, his wife and courtiers, they tell him that this Brahmin has sat at your door for 3 days without hospitality. And so that is a great wrong. He said that if a Brahmin goes without food in someone's house, that man, a fool, will see all his hopes and expectations dashed to the ground. Merits of good company, good speech, performing sacrifices, providing wells and other sources of water for the benefit of others, as well as his cattle and children, all these are destroyed. Now in Hindu culture, Indian culture, the guest, the Titi, was considered as God himself. And so hospitality to guests was a very important part in society and a very important part of Dharma. And as I mentioned, this is one thing you notice when you go to India, is how hospitable the people are, how much joy they actually take. And particularly, I think, when you're a foreigner, coming from America, they just really are so happy that you're there, and I'm so happy to serve you and give you food, and really force you to eat the food. But so that whole concept is very deeply ingrained in Indian culture, and is considered a very prime kind of element in Dharma. And particularly if the guest is a Brahmin, which is considered kind of the most spiritual, the highest caste, it was considered a great crime, great harm to harm a Brahmin or to treat a Brahmin disrespectfully. So this is what, when Yama gets back to his house, this is what his household people tell him. This little boy, this little Brahmin boy, has been sitting here for 3 days without getting any proper hospitality or treatment, and that's, can do you a great harm. Then Yama comes to Nachiketa, and he tells him, he says, "O Brahmin, you are my guest, and you are also a Brahmin. I owe you much respect. I salute you. Please bless me that I may prosper. Brahmin, you spent 3 days in my house without eating anything. Please ask 3 boons for me, 1 for each of the 3 nights you stayed in my house." So when Yama is informed of this situation by his household, he approaches Nachiketa. And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you haven't, you've sat here for 3 days without food, without proper hospitality. And so in exchange for that, I will grant you 3 boons." And so this is like setting up the story. So Nachiketa now, he has 3 boons given by Yama, the god of death. And this is about where we had come to previously. Shanta sankau sumana yata syad vita mandur goltama madhi vitro tvat pravishtam ma vivade pratita etat trayanam pratamam varam vrene. So Nachiketa said in reply, "O death, please grant that my father, Gotama, may be free from worry, that he may be in a happy mood, that he may no longer be angry with me, and that when I return from your place, he may readily recognize me and greet me as before. Of the 3 boons, this is the first I ask for." So the first thing Nachiketa asked for is that his father have peace of mind. His father was very upset and angry, when he sent him to the god of death. And so the first thing Nachiketa, once he said his father will be cheerful again, in a happy state of mind, that he won't be angry with him anymore, and that when he comes back from the abode of death, that his father will accept him back with love like before. So yata pursta bhavita pratita adala kira runi mat parashtra sukam ratri sayata vita manu stam didishti van ritur mukhat pramukta. So Yama replied, your father, Aldahalaki, son of Aruna, was affectionate to you before. You are now going back home at my instance, and he will be equally affectionate and cordial to you. Till you return, he will have good sleep at night. He will not be displeased when he sees you back home, released from death's clutches. So he's telling him, Nachiketa, that yes, I grant you when your father will be pacified, he won't be disturbed or unhappy or upset, and when you come back, he will accept you back with as much love as he had before. Svarge loke nabayam kinchanasti natata tvam nacharaya vibheti ubhe tirtva samaya vipase shoka tigo modate svarga loke. So Nachiketa said, there is nothing to be afraid of in heaven. You, O death, have no influence there, and thus there is no fear of old age. Hunger and thirst also do not trouble a person. Free from sorrow and mental anguish, he enjoys life in heaven. So then the next verse says, Satvam magnim swargyamadyeshi Vitro Prabhuhi Tvam Shraddhanaya Maya Svarga Loka Amrita Tvam Bhajanta Etat Tviti Yena Grine Varina. Says, O death, you know the fire sacrifice, which is the way to heaven. So please explain it to me. I have faith. Those who are in heaven enjoy immortality. This knowledge of the fire sacrifice is what I ask for you as my second boon from you. So he's asking, first of all, he talks about the value of heaven, that in heaven there's relative immortality. People don't suffer from hunger and thirst and other problems. And then he says, I want to know that sacrifice which will take a person to heaven, that fire sacrifice. Now, in the ancient times, in the Vedic worship, back when they did the yajnas, the Vedic worship, in a way, it was like the science and technology of their day. And there's this, you find that they lived in a world, people lived in a world with all kinds of forces of nature and things. And the question was, well, how can you control these forces? So they knew, or they believed that behind the forces, the things that go on in the universe, there were these, the deities, the gods and goddesses and different powers were there. And through the proper mode of worship, you could kind of appease these deities and attain different results. It might be prosperity, it might be long life, and also it could be going to heaven. Now Yama, the god Yama, god of death, according to Hindu mythology, the gods and goddesses were actually, it's like a bureaucracy. And the god Yama, god of death, was actually a soul which had advanced very high spiritually. And now he had taken up that position of Yama. And for perhaps millions of years, he might hold that position. But eventually, he would lose it and have to come back to earth again. And so, Yama says he had attained his position through performing this particular sacrifice, as well as other meritorious deeds. And so, he was the one to teach Nachiketa. I'll just read this commentary from Katha Upanishad. This is Swami Varandanda's translation. So it says that Yama had been immortal himself, but by practicing the fire sacrifice, he became a god, and now lives in heaven, also holding the office of Yama. Thus, he was the most fit person to teach Nachiketa the fire sacrifice. Nachiketa knew this, and that is why he asked this boon of Yama. According to the Hindus, the gods and goddesses were originally ordinary human beings, but they improved in spiritual terms and became godlike persons. So in mythology, it is such persons who after death go to the plane known as heaven. That is Svargaloka, Brahmaloka, or Devaloka. By and large, they live a very happy life. Some of them even hold offices, as Yama did. Yama presides over death. Similarly, other deities preside over other phenomena. So all this may be tempting, but the good things they enjoy are temporary. They may last for 1,000,000 years, yet they come to an end sometime or other. Everything that forms part of the phenomenal world is perishable. Heaven is perishable as well as heavenly things and the people who control them. So when the gods and goddesses finish their tenure, they resume their life as mortals from where they left off. This goes on and on until they realize the futility of this so-called heavenly life and turn to self-knowledge. So only self-knowledge can give liberation and therefore immortality. So heaven promises immortality, but that is a relative immortality. Immortality in that context means only a long life. Similarly, every attractive thing that heaven offers is relative. Only what self-knowledge gives is permanent. So this is, you remember the story of Indra, the god, that he had just become an Indra. Soul had just now become Indra, and he was planning to build all his heavenly mansions and all kinds of things. And then I believe he meant Vishnu, or Krishna. But Krishna showed him a tree with like blackberries on it, and then he showed Indra that each of those berries was a previous Indra. That so many Indras had come and gone, and he was just the latest in a long line. So the idea behind all this is that as human beings, as individuals, individual souls in this universe, we have the capacity to evolve, and to either go up higher and higher, or to go down lower and lower, depending on when we are kind of moving in the right direction towards truth. We're gradually getting higher, elevated, and even an individual can reach the level of the gods and goddesses, can even become perhaps one of the bureaucrats in heaven, in charge of a particular aspect of the creation. But he's still an individual within the creation. He hasn't yet realized the truth behind the creation. And if you remember from the mythology, behind the gods and goddesses and so forth, that actually sages often were more powerful. Had the capacity to curse them or to do whatever, because they had realized their real self, their true self, out of which the whole universe has come. So we're all actually, throughout all our lives, all our experiences and so forth, we're actually trying to grow and evolve in consciousness. Right now, consciousness becomes very small, very limited. As a human being, we can do some things, we can have some pleasure, some happiness, we can do some good in the world, and like that, but very, very limited. But as we begin to move towards our true self, towards the presence of God within, then gradually consciousness begins to grow higher and higher until it begins to become universal. Swami Vivekananda said that selfishness is contraction. It makes you smaller and smaller, and that's death. He said, on the other hand, unselfishness is expansion. It means your consciousness is expanding to include more than just you, this particular body, but it's beginning to expand and include other people, other beings. The more unselfish a person becomes, the more his consciousness expands until he may become one with some of the cosmic powers, with the whole universe. It's ultimately, the goal is to get even higher than that, to realize the oneness of things. That everything that exists is Brahman. Everything is an expression of Brahman. The real self within each individual is Brahman, and all of our experiences, even going to heaven or things like that, they're all part of our kind of our journey of trying to get back reunited, back into oneness with that real self. So you remember the vision that Sri Ramakrishna had about Swami Vivekananda, that where he saw that he was going up on a kind of tunnel of light, going higher and higher, raising higher and higher in consciousness, and he said he reached the realm of the gods and goddesses. But then he went even beyond that, beyond the realm of form, beyond the realm of individualized form. He went even beyond that into the non-dual level, the oneness of spiritual consciousness, and there he saw 7 sages seated in meditation. And you remember that Swami Vivekananda, he said he recognized as one of those sages who had come to help with his work. So beyond even the level of gods and goddesses, there's even a higher level, that of the oneness of things, the being one with the oneness of things. So Yama had attained his position through his tremendous spiritual progress, his tremendous unselfishness, his expansion of his consciousness, but also through performing the fire sacrifice and other rituals that brought these results. So then we come to verse 14. Prate bravemi tadu me dibodha visvargya magnim nachiketa prajnanam ananta loka timato pratishtam vidhi tvametam nihitam guhaya. So Yama said, O Nachiketa, I know well the fire sacrifice that leads to heaven. I will explain it to you in detail. Please listen carefully and try to understand it. Please remember, this fire is the means of attaining immortality, and it is also the support of the universe. It lies hidden in the minds of the wise. So it says the word fire means the essence of everything. This is why it is called the support of the universe. Hindus believe that if you worship something, you become one with it. If you worship fire, you become one with fire. That is, you become one with the essence of everything. And if you are the essence of everything, then you are immortal. That is why it is said here that by worshiping fire, you attain immortality. The ultimate reality, according to Vedanta, is pure consciousness. What this pure consciousness is like, no one can describe. It is also known as existence absolute, intelligence absolute, bliss absolute. Its other names are Parama Brahman and Paramatma. The use of so many names suggests how futile it is to describe the reality. The fact is that the ultimate reality is beyond thought and speech. It is just one. And because it is one, who is there to describe it? And describe it in what terms? Any qualifying word you use with reference to the reality will only distort it. If you say it is good, then what is bad? You must then assume that there is another reality, and that is dualism. In non-dualism, there is only one and nothing but one. That one is everywhere and in everything. So we see diversity around us. But in reality, it is not diversity. It is only one. We see diversity because of the many names and forms that the one assumes. The process of seeing the one as many is called Maya, or avidya, ignorance. This diversity may not be real, but it has to be treated as real at the practical level. Through discrimination, by practicing firm renunciation and with the help of a good teacher, the wrong notions of I and you with all their concomitants will go. What remains is one I, one self, which is the common self of all. So this common self holds together all that exists, like a thread holding together all the pearls in a necklace. It is this common self that is called in this verse Agni, or fire. It is also called Virat, the cosmic being, Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg, Ishvara, God, Prajapati, the Lord of all beings, and Brahma. It is the first manifestation of Brahman, the ultimate reality, in association with Maya. Brahman at this point is Saguna with attributes. Brahman as the ultimate reality, that is, this pure consciousness, is Nirguna, without any attributes. There is no way of describing it. So Brahman, the reality, the full, is a pure consciousness. And it's absolute consciousness. Now we as human beings, we have consciousness. We have right now, we're aware. We're awake, we're aware of what's going on, we're aware of what's in this room, and so forth. So we're conscious. But the consciousness we experience is consciousness connected with the body, with the senses, with the mind, and all the things that make up a human being. That consciousness is connected with these things, and then we say, okay, I'm here, I'm aware, and I'm alive, and I'm conscious of things. But if we begin to search within, or follow the spiritual path, eventually what you discover is that the consciousness, the thing within you that's saying, okay, I'm here, I exist, I'm aware, that consciousness is actually only the consciousness. That consciousness, that self within you, is actually the consciousness, the self within all beings. And so as a person, as we said, a person can evolve, can become better, become more unselfish. Now, the more selfish a person is, the more his consciousness is saying, I'm this body, this little self here, this is me, and everything, this is the most important thing in the universe, nobody else counts other than that. But as a person starts to become unselfish, what he's actually doing is moving away from thinking, I'm this physical body, I'm this one small individual here, to gradually becoming aware that the consciousness within me, my real self, is also within everybody else. And this is what you grow. As a person progresses in that direction, then he eventually becomes like a god, a cosmic power, various high levels of he reaches of consciousness and expands into something much vaster than human existence. But ultimately, when he gets to the highest point, he realizes that that whole sense of I, of this separate ego, of this separate individual, was actually false. That all the time, in truth, it's just been the Lord himself, the one Lord who has become him, become me, become you, become everybody else. And so it's at that point, when a person has discovered what he really is inside, he's discovered the spiritual consciousness inside, then he also can begin to realize that that same consciousness is within everybody else. And this creates a complete transformation. A person may become a very good person, very noble person, very unselfish, but yet he's still an ego, still an individual, and still capable of kind of preferring me more than you. But when a person begins to attains that awareness of the oneness, of the unity of things, then what flows through him is no longer an individual ego, whether it's good or bad or anything else. It's now the expression of the divine itself. And this is what we're trying to achieve in this world, in this life, is to manifest, express the kind of the glory, the power, the love, the wisdom that's within us. But when we get into the world, we forget that's there. Okay, like where the prince who's got amnesia is just wandering around the streets, forgetting, oh, this is where I've come from, this is who I am. And so then we display all the human qualities, good or bad. You know, so, the more we're identified with things other than kind of the real self, the darker our consciousness becomes. The more ignorance we have, the more limited we are. It's like, but yet as we move towards our own true self within, our own true consciousness, or you can say towards the presence of God within, then we begin to unfold and grow spiritually. So in Vedanta, you know, there's only one thing that exists, and that's God. It exists as a self within each individual, but it exists equally in the self of all individuals. As long as we're saying, I'm this individual, I'm special, I'm different than everybody else, then we were still kind of confined within our very limited. It's like a bubble in the ocean that thinks, oh, this is all I am. But when the bubble breaks with that ego, that sense of I'm something separate, I'm something different from the whole, when that breaks, then what's there is just the one ocean, the one vast ocean of consciousness. And so this, like I say, in deep samadhi, they experience Brahman Nirguna aspect, Brahman in his pure self. When you come back from that, then you also realize Brahman in everything. And your whole concept of the world, of life, of people, everything is totally transformed. And your whole expression of things is completely different. You remember how Swami Varadananda said that when a person is able to transcend go beyond his body, and then even beyond the mind, he reaches a point where he discovers that he's pure spiritual consciousness. And he said at that time, then he realized I'm not a body and I'm not a mind, I'm this pure spiritual consciousness, and surrounded me on all sides, kind of with me, I'm contained within this much, much more vaster consciousness. But as a person becomes aware of his own spiritual nature, of his own true consciousness, his own true self, Swami Varadananda said that when you come back to that deep meditation, when you come back, you're not really, oh, that same self, that same way it's there in everybody else. We're all, not even just family, we're even much closer than that. When you realize that every single person, that's me in another form, then your whole experience and all the kind of loneliness, alienation, the separation between people, this then ends. But as you begin to realize that each person is a spirit, is a child of God, is a wonderful being. And so, okay, so then we come to next verse, 15. It's Lokadi Mamim Tamovacha Tasmai Ya Ishtaka Yavatirva Yatava Sakchapi Tat Pratja Vada Jachokta Matasya Mithur Punarivaha Tushta. So Yama told Nachiketa that fire was the first world, in other words, the first embodied existence. He then described how the fire sacrifice was to be performed. He told him such details as how the sacrificial altar had to be built, what kind of bricks were to be used, and how they were to be arranged. He also told him how the fire was to be lighted. Nachiketa correctly repeated each word Rama had spoken. This pleased Yama, and he then said, so Yama is teaching Nachiketa, taught him how to do the fire sacrifice, how to build the altar what bricks to use, how to light the fire and so forth. And in the yagnas, the ancient Vedic worship, as I said, it was kind of their science and technology of their day. And so, in order for a worship yagna to be successful, it had to be done correctly. If it was done wrongly, it wouldn't produce the same effect. Just as a chemist, if he puts together the wrong ingredients or in the wrong way, he won't get the result that he's seeking. In the same way, in the ancient worship, you had to do it correct, and you had to chant the mantras with correct pronunciation and so forth in order to get the correct result. Now this is actually based upon the idea that this physical level, behind the physical level of existence, there's a more subtle level of existence. And by attuning yourself to that subtle level of existence, you can begin to create results here. The idea behind creation, behind the creation of the universe, that you find, is that all creation starts with God. It's a very subtle vibration. It's locked. A very subtle vibration goes from God, and then as it percolates down through grosser and grosser levels of manifestation, it finally comes down to the material level, the physical level, where we're at now. But the creative force, the creative power, is actually at the inner, more subtle level. And so the more subtle your consciousness becomes, the more inward it goes, the closer it's getting to the causes that produce what we experience as our life. Now most people, we tend to think that if my life is not going well, I've got to straighten something out in the world. I've got to find a better job or a better home or do something, but actually the way, if your life is not going well, the real causes of what's producing all your problems, they're kind of subtle within the deeper levels of your mind and consciousness. So as you move towards those more subtle levels, then you begin to become aware of kind of the forces behind what's going on. So for example, I often use the example, when I was a kid, back in summer, we have these June bugs, these little beetles would come. And so as a kid, I would take a stick, a June bug would be there, I'd take a stick and I'd put it in front of the June bug and bump into it. And then back up and try to go another way, and I'd put the stick over there and bump into it. But the June bug had no idea that there was a dumb kid there putting a stick. He just knew everywhere I went, I kept bumping into something. So like that, in life, we find ourselves continually bumping into things and not knowing why. But actually there is a why, but the why is at this more subtle level. So now the principle behind this, and which is also a principle behind mantras, is that behind the physical result that we see at this level, there's like a subtle creative force going on. And by doing these worships in a certain way, and particularly like in the chanting of mantras, the idea behind a mantra is that the mantra is not the gross sound that you make. When you pronounce the mantra, that gross sound is an approximation of a more subtle vibration. Like I said, it starts off very, very subtle vibration and with Ishvara, and then comes down and down. And so the mantra, when you give it, works to attune your system so that gradually you create a connection with that more subtle level, cosmic level, and depending on the mantra, the nature of the mantra, it attunes you to a particular deity, particular aspect of the divine. And it's exactly like tuning your radio. If you want to hear a certain station, you put your dial to 1240, and that station will come in. So if you tune your system, the physical and your nervous system, everything, to a certain vibration, then that particular aspect of creation, that particular deity, that consciousness will begin to come into your consciousness. And so that's why it's necessary to pronounce mantras correctly. Because if you pronounce the mantra wrong, it won't produce that result, because you're not setting up that same kind of attunement. And so this is behind the worships, behind the yajnas, in the way they did the rituals, and the way they chanted the mantras, everything else, this principle was there. And this is why one particular school, one of the darshans of Hinduism is called Purva Mimamsa, or the Mimamsa school, which emphasized very much the rituals, and particularly the mantras and the correct pronunciation of the Sanskrit and all, because that was what would attune your worship to the deity, and which would produce the result. It's just like if a chemist performs the experiment, mixes the ingredients right, and at the right temperature, right pressure, and so forth, then he'll get the results. Otherwise he won't. In the same way, if a person performed one of these worships, and also part of this performing the worship was the attunement of consciousness to the worship going on. In other words, the consciousness had to be kind of uplifted and connected, and then the whole thing could flow and produce the expected results. So this is why Yamadeva, he shows Nachiketa the technique, the method by which you can do this particular fire worship, which grants immortality, by which you can do that correctly so you'll get that result. Now this, later on in Hinduism, you develop the idea of devotion, of bhakti. So that now, the worship we do now is not based upon all these kind of technical things. It's based on kind of love for God. And in fact, this is the highest form of worship. Yeah, as long as you're doing this, you're performing worship to get a result. This is why the Vedas themselves, the Rig Vedas, they're called karma kanda, the work portion, because the goal is to produce certain results. But when you seek only to know God, seek only to be with God, to somehow become united with God, this is a much higher form of worship. So, for example, in America, we have what they call the Metaphysical Movement. This a lot of kind of groups in America, many of them, they heard about these Hindu ideas, these spiritual ideas, and about meditation, things like this, and kind of the power of meditation. And so they began to adapt some of these yogic techniques and practices and meditation, but aimed at a specific goal. Like, okay, I meditate on having a nice home, or having a BMW, or I meditate on prosperity, like that. And so, in other words, they would use the kind of spiritual teachings, but then they direct, okay, if I do this, then I can sell more insurance, or I can figure out which stocks to buy, and all this. And so, this is still, it's a much lower form of worship than pure love for God. And that worship, it may produce, and depending if it's done correctly, or with the proper power of mind and so forth, it can get results. But that's all. It'll get ordinary results. It may bring prosperity, it may bring health, it may bring this or that, but it won't bring you to a realization of God. And this is what Swami Varadananda had mentioned earlier. Even going to heaven, this is not the goal. The goal is to become united with God, and then you've reached, okay, this was the purpose of everything. This is the ultimate goal. Then you reach your true kind of immortality. You reach that which you've been seeking all your lives. This is what we've been searching for. And so, but anyway, then, so he shows Nachiketa how to do this particular worship. And Nachiketa was a very good student. He's very sincere, great shraddha, great faith and all. So Yama is very pleased with it. And then he says, Tama Bravit Priyamano Mahatma Varam Taved Haja Dadami Bhuya Tavaiva Namana Bhavita Yam Agnihi Shrikam Che Maneka Rupam Grihana. So that great soul Yama, highly delighted, said to Nachiketa, says, here's another boon I want to give you. This fire sacrifice will henceforth be known by your name. Take also this multi-shaped necklace. So naming the fire sacrifice is the fourth boon that Yama offers. It's like an extra added bonus because Yama did so well. So earlier he had promised Nachiketa 3 boons. Yama is given here the honorific, the great soul. In what sense is he a great soul? Or who is a great soul? The great soul is one whose mind always dwells on a high plane. Yama was surely one such person, being a god. The word Shvinka has 2 meanings. One meaning is necklace, and since it is called multi-shaped, it is a special kind of necklace. It may be a necklace of stones having different colors and shapes. It may also be one that makes musical sounds as one walks along. So another meaning is that it is the path of doing work according to sacrifices and reaping the good fruits thereof. Yama promises to teach Nachiketa about this path. So the second meaning appeals to Shankara more than the first. So we'll stop there. Everybody brings us up through verse 16. Okay, we can stop there. Okay, so any questions? Okay.
This Nachiketa and Yama. Yama here was a very great teacher.
Hmm?
And Nachiketa was also equally a great student.
Mm-hmm.
I remember from scriptures, whenever a great teacher taught a great student, he really learned a lot of things.
Yeah.
For example, just one example. When it is from Ramayana, I'm giving an example because I think most people are familiar with that. When Sri Ramchandra was facing Rama and was wondering, Sri Ramchandra was wondering for some time that I have to vanquish demonic power of Rama only in this form, in human form. He was fully conscious, Sri Ramchandra was fully conscious of his own divine existence, his own divinity, that he is the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Yet he was asserting his humanity and not divinity. At this point, Maharishi Agast appeared and told him that until and unless you assert your own divinity, you will not be able to vanquish Rama, because Rama has got a boon from Lord Shiva and Brahma that he cannot be killed and defeated by a human being. Then he gave him a mantra. And in that mantra then he says, Maharishi Agast said, now here is the word he said, Puja Swenam Ekadro Dev Devam Jagat Patam. O Lord of the universe, you are the Lord of the universe. And I offer my salutations to thee, but you must practice this mantra with ekadra chit. Ekadra means with full concentration, complete.
Yeah.
That is the method. Sometime, my point of mentioning this one is that when we are doing certain mantras or certain puja, I don't think we have been fully trained by our teacher how to do that. And that's why we are not, as you mentioned, that you always get the result. You move from physical level of existence to a certain level of existence. But unfortunately, in this world, many people do meditation. As Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manushyanam Sastra-eshu Kashti Jatati Siddha. There are thousands and thousands of people who meditate on me every day. But there are only very few who achieve perfect divinity or perfect realization. And out of these people who achieve Siddha, there are only hardly one or two, Kashchit, there are only one who know my tattva, who know my true divinity or true divine nature, that will become one with me. There are only hardly maybe one. And I think the reason behind that one is that Sri Krishna was a great teacher to Arjuna, August was a great teacher to Lord Sri Ramchandra. What was his name? Maharishi, who is the Rishi of gods? Narada. Narada was a great Rishi who taught these methods to Dhruva and to little children like Prahlad. That they were able to achieve, and also even to great Maharishi who wrote the Ramayana, Valmiki. I know these three examples whom the Narada, he told them how to practice, how to do it. When they learned, they were able to achieve that realization. My only point is, or comment of this is, that unless a teacher is fully qualified, he himself is fully realized soul, it is very difficult for that teacher to transform that knowledge to a student and transform him into that. So Yama was a great teacher and Nichiketa was a great student. During this life or during these days, I do not know whether we can have that kind of perfect teacher who can have the power of transformation. I have not seen anybody, Maharaj, to be honest with you, with due respect to everybody, that I have not seen that who could shift a student from a gross level to a certain level. Maybe there are some. They may be sitting in Himalayas or someplace and we have to look for that one. But I do not know, I have gone to many places, yet I have not been able to find that one who could transform my gross level, shift me from gross level to a certain level.
Well, that is
anybody there?
Yeah. Well, Sri Ramakrishna was one of the few that could do that. With just a touch, he could do that to anybody. But it's very rare. But see, Sri Ramakrishna, he could give any kind of spiritual experience to anybody just by a touch, but he rarely used it because he knew most people were not ready for it. So you have to, the teacher has to have the capacity to be able to do that, but also the student has to be ready to accept it. And this is why Yama and Nachiketa, and this is, Yama says to have such a wonderful student is such a rare thing, because only then can the teacher truly transmit this type of knowledge. Most people, the great majority of us, where we still have a lot of imperfections or will react against it. We'll fight it. We'll shut it off, and so then the teacher has to kind of back off. He can't give the full thing. He has to kind of spoon feed and gradually lead the person. So the part of it is from the teacher, and if the teacher is what they call Satguru, someone who's realized the truth, then that truth can be transmitted to him, but the student has to be ready to, able to accept it and hold it. Usually most people get a little bit of spiritual power and they kind of go off their head. You know, they just get totally thrown off balance. So it takes a great deal of kind of preparation to be able to actually receive that kind of truth. But all of us, anybody who's doing spiritual practices, meditation, things like, is moving in the right direction, is moving towards that, and eventually there comes a day when it comes. Now, and it's important to remember too that realization to realization can come at any instant and can come all at once. Because in our practices, in our experience, we develop gradually. You know, we go on day after day, doing the meditation, and slowly we're getting better, the mind's getting calmer, getting steadier, and we're making progress. But it's kind of slow, gradual, kind of steady progress. And in that process, we can become very wonderful, kind of spiritual beings. We can become ultimately even gods or goddesses like that. But now realization is something different altogether. In your spiritual progress, you're an individual making spiritual progress, growing and evolving. But in realization, the individual is gone, and Brahman remains, consciousness remains, and that's it's either it comes in an instant if it comes, and it comes completely. But it only comes when the individual that's keeping itself separate from the divine, when that's has somehow disappeared. And that, you know, it's like the difference between being asleep and being awake. Once you're awake, you're awake. You know, that's it. You don't have to struggle anymore. You don't have to make something happen. But you have to wake up. And reaching that point where we're ready to wake up, ready to actually receive the real grace of God, takes a lot of preparation, because the ego, to the ego, this is death. Becoming united with God means, oh, I don't exist anymore. But actually, when you give up the ego totally, then what's there is something much higher than the ego, and something that's much more you than what the ego was. Right now, we have this as, oh, I'm this body. And if you ask a person to give up this body consciousness, it's very difficult. This is what I am. This is who I am. How can I do that? But through as you go on with your practice, you'll get glimpses. Suddenly there's another state of consciousness there other than the body. And then you realize, oh, okay, this is here. Gradually, as you'll begin to realize, okay, I'm becoming kind of stable there. That more and more, I'm this higher consciousness, and the body consciousness is just kind of off to the side. And like that, we're progressing and we're moving. And God's grace, as Sri Ramakrishna said, God's grace is always blowing. It's always there, ready, but simply we have to kind of remove, the sun's always shining, but we have to remove the clouds. As soon as the clouds are removed, there the sun is. It's always been there. We are always what we've always been. And so everything is done, but as long as there's the clouds, which roughly they call ajnana, ignorance, the sense. It's not basically the fundamental sense is ego. That I'm an individual that's separate, different than God. And 99% of people, that's the way we want it. We don't want God to, we want God to give us heaven, yes, all these wonderful places, but we don't want God to interfere or kind of destroy the ego. But it's only when the ego is transcended, then the higher consciousness opens up. So for most people, it's a gradual thing. But if you're on the path, if you're making progress, then you're on your way. I mean, and eventually, the person who's, as long as you keep walking, keep moving, eventually you're going to reach the goal. And it can come, like I said, in an instant. The mind can create all kinds of obstacles and barriers and worries and fears, but at any moment, the kind of truth can come. As I say, for improving the mind, for getting the mind in better states, and for getting more subtle levels, then it's kind of gradual. But for realization, it's from one step to the next. You never know when you're going to hit that one step, and then suddenly, oh, here it is, and then that's it. So, but as the Holy Mothers say, though, that everything ultimately it comes by the grace of God. But she used to also say that the deer doesn't walk into the mouth of a sleeping lion. You know, you've got to be kind of working, and then when the things or the conditions are right, the grace can come in. But until then, you have to keep kind of alert, busy at it. So, okay, so any other questions we have? But anyway, this is one of the special things about Yama and Nachiketa, is that Yama was a perfect teacher and Nachiketa was also a perfect student. Then you have kind of really wonderful results. Otherwise, poor spiritual teachers, they have this wonderful knowledge and they get kind of a bunch of duds to work with, and so they do the best they can, and they, according to the ability, the capacity. I'm sure most teachers may experience that. In your class, you may have one really brilliant student who just, and how much you appreciate that, and you have a whole lot of students who really could care less or don't understand at all, something like that. So any other questions? Anything else? Okay, now, tomorrow now, we are going to have our fundraising dinner here. It'll be 6:30 in the evening. We're going to have Rambala, his group is coming. They're going to sing, and we've set a stage up over there. And Swami Varadananda will be the main speaker. Swami Bhaskarananda was supposed to come from Seattle, but he had a back operation, had to cancel. So Swami Varadananda will give the main talk, but basically, have the bhajans. I think most of you have heard Rambala, but his group is very good. Very nice. They really created a good atmosphere. So that's there. Then Sunday, Swami Varadananda is going to be leaving. He's going to leave here about 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. He's got to go out to Hollywood Center, do the Sunday talk there. So he's got to catch a plane at 6:30, reach Hollywood, get to the center and do the Sunday talk there. And so he'll be gone all week, next week, up until Friday. So I'll do the Sunday talk on the same thing, meditation, theory, and practice. And then on Tuesday, I'll take his Tuesday class on the gospel. And then on Friday, we'll have our regular class, Katha Upanishad. And then later in the month, Swami Varadananda will be doing his retreat in Ganges. Om Asato Ma Satyame Tamaso Ma Jyotirgaya Mrityurma Namitam Gaya Om Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om peace.